Good morning, everyone. John471 here to discuss possible scenarios for the S&P 500 today. It's Friday, April 25th, 2025. Allow me to read our disclaimer. Derivatives trading is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. On to our news. Today, for scheduled news at 10 a.m. Eastern, we have the University of Michigan Consumer Confidence. It's a number to be aware of, will be relatively significant, and it's all that we have today. Aside from our unscheduled news, of course. Moving on to our charts, we'll begin today with the S&P 500 RTH only. This is an RTH only chart with daily profiles. And what have I been talking about for the last, I guess 3 weeks is 4-9, the April 9th day where we got the 90-day pause news and we impulsed higher. And I talked about how we put in this high at 55.20. Then we came and put in this low. We failed to get the high. We took the low and we very quickly found buyers and reverted higher with a lot of unauctioned areas left as we pushed higher. As we pushed higher there, I made a big deal out of these 2 days, and I said if we get through these 2 days, then we have a shot at taking this high, and we pushed in, we pushed into these 2 days here, put in a double distribution profile, and then what did we get yesterday? We held this high, and we got a high of 55.20. To the tick, the same as the 4-9 day during RTH. So the high remains 55.20 for now. But, well, actually, I say that just, that's what happened, 55.20, 55.20. Those are our highs during RTH. However, we did push through during ETH. We'll go over that. But anyway, so here during RTH, what are we just seeing? This area is still very important. This high is crucial, obviously. And we have these two kind of island days shaping up. And what inquiring minds want to know is, do we settle the week within this island, or do we push above into this gap zone, or maybe below into this gap zone? That is really what we want to figure out today. Up here, down here, or somewhere in here. That's what we want to figure out. Let's do our best to figure it out. We'll move on now to a full session chart just to take a quick glance at it. Here we see our full session chart, and what we notice here is this 58.20 high is a little less important than we thought it was. Or, it's still important, it's the RTH high, but the 55.20s were this high. We did push above to 55.2875. And then overnight here, you can see we got the whole way to 55.63. I'll tell you, is there another price up here that's really, really important? Yeah, there is. It's 55.64, and it's this high, which is the last line of defense really before we get to this this POC, this naked weekly VPOC, which is at 56.75. So those are areas that we can target as well. We're going to move on to a smaller time frame chart to look at market structure here. Actually, before we depart from this chart, there is one more thing I wanted to mention, I wanted to call our attention to. As I said, we do have an island kind of situation working out here, and I just wanted to call our attention to the fact that that is quite obviously reiterated in our developing weekly profile with a very clear LVN here, which is our gap zone. And we also have our developing weekly VPOC right here at 75s, which is going to be key. Sorry for these scribbles. They really don't look like they make sense, but you see what I'm talking about. But anyway, I just wanted to flag that because we can see it on this chart, and these 75s are going to factor into what we're looking at today. So I just wanted to add that before we move on. Okay, that's it. Let's move on. Okay, so this is a chart that I really have not shown too much, but it's one that I really like for getting a different perspective on market structure. This is a PNF chart. It's a larger time frame PNF chart. 3 points by 4 is the time frame, and these profiles are daily profiles which combine which merge anytime the value overlaps. So here we have that area that I had talked about, which is basically for April 14th and 15th, which became a very tight area, a fight area. This is an area I've been talking about for a while, is important to be aware of and how we trade against it. We fell out of that area, and this profile right here is our developing weekly profile. You see, we started the week with our gap lower. We dropped on panic and recovered, managed to recover this area, and then just shoot above it, leaving a gap zone. So now this area right here, I'll get rid of the rest of this. So now this area right here is the island kind of situation I was talking about. Recall, and we'll stay with the logic of this chart. But anyway, so what we see is since we kind of repriced up into this island region, we pushed higher, we found some resistance. This was an area that I talked about as key yesterday, and we'll talk about it again. We pushed up to here. We found a pretty firm offer in the place that we knew we would find a pretty firm offer, or at least we had reason to expect. And then we reverted lower, ding, little tap of the gap zone, and then boom, just another explosion, another wave of buying goes off, and we leave more unauctioned areas, as we can see here in our single prints. This chart right here really illustrates well the plans I had yesterday, which hopefully if you were able to tune in for our plans yesterday, we'll discuss it briefly, but we had a very balanced profile down here, and we had just a clean break of it, just a real clean break of it, which is the first thing that we talked about in plans, but still incredibly easy to miss, a clean break of a balanced profile that went straight to where we thought it could go. And then here was the thing, if you missed that, there was a second chance, because what was the other thing I was talking about? I said, if we get into here, very specifically, I said that there appeared to be a quorum of buying going on in here. And if we got back into this area, we may see that updraft happen again. That is this area right here, which it's outlined in gray. To me, if we're below it, it was acting as resistance. But what do we see right here? We get that updraft I was talking about, where we get into this area. We can't take the low. This is the stuff I talk about every day in terms of how to gauge context once we get into an important area. We get into this area, we accept prices, we no longer can take the low. We expand rotations higher through the high, and what do you know? We get a pullback, and boom, we catch exactly that updraft that I talked about yesterday for what I thought was, yesterday you could have got on the breakout if you were really quick and you expected it. But if you missed that one, I think this was the one where there was opportunity in terms of what we plan to see. So where does that leave us now? So now we've pushed through this area. We've left this unauctioned stuff, this unauctioned area below. So what's going on? In my opinion, the big key is going to be this area right here again. This area that we recovered it, and then we started to trend from it. So the big question for me, you see us pulling back a little bit. Do we hold this area? And this becomes just a trend higher, where we are able to take the high and get into this gap zone. Does this become a trend higher? That's door number one. Door number two would be that this area does not hold, and you see us drop into it. Maybe we try to revert, but the bottom line is no matter what, we don't get this high again, and we start to revert lower, take out these unauctioned areas. Door number three would obviously be if we just stay within this range. That's a reasonably strong possibility. But I do want to be aware of the possibilities if we move today. What everybody, all the dip buyers would love to see, we see this essentially a sine curve in price action. So it would make sense to just drop into here and just push back up and then continue the sine curve. And that's a scenario that could easily happen. We drop into here. How would I look at that? Well, this is right around the 5450s. So basically what I would be looking for is a drop into 5450s, gets messy, and then I'd look for the reversion higher impulse pullback. We'll go over it. But that's one possibility. If we drop into here, find support here, and just push up and continue the sine curve. But the other one is if we drop through this area, through yesterday's low, and the sine curve actually ends up looking like this, in which case that gets really important because our prior week settle is here. All right, that's enough. It's already 10 minutes in. Let's go to a smaller time frame chart and plan for actual specific price action, draw a sharper point on what we've just went over. Okay, here we are on an intraday chart. I have the stock zones up. What else are you seeing? These are daily profiles on a 2x4 PNF. This profile is the profile of the island right here that we're in. And our gap zone is obviously down here. I don't have the master levels up. Actually, I'll put them up because they're important for this. There we go. And so this is our island. This red line is the VWAP of the island, which I find significant for what we're doing today. And this zone is really, really important to me. This is a really important zone here. Right with the 75s is our developing VPOC of the week and the area. And it's also, boom, center of mass for this area I talked about as being important and was important yesterday. So let's go over some ideas. We'll take the stock zones off so it's a little clearer. Where is that button? I don't know. Okay. We'll go over bullish ideas first, although I have to emphasize really anything could happen today, but as always, we'll go over everything. Set this up here. Okay, bullish ideas initially. All right, the easiest bullish idea, we just pushed essentially to the key area right now, right into this first set of singles right down to here. So generally speaking, if just this area kind of holds, it might not be this exact overnight low. Maybe we push it a little bit, but here's the thing. If this general VPOC area holds right here, what we could see is a bit of a lick check. However, it could happen is just kind of balance, chop around up here, and then impulse higher. If we get that, then obviously this LVN, which is right around yesterday's high, and guess what price? 55.20s. It's right around that price. If we can get an impulse out of here that gets to that area and holds, then we're looking for the overnight VPOC, which is right here, and we're looking for the overnight high, which is absolutely crucial as to whether or not we take the overnight high or not. It's not looking like we will at this point, but it's super early because we have all of this in the way. But if we get something like this that essentially holds the that kind of uptrend area that I highlighted here, here's where we broke out of that area. So if we just hold that, as I say, with a lick check and we impulse, we get above this overnight LVN and get into this overnight distribution, then I'll be looking for the overnight high. So if this sequence plays out, now everyone sees what this sequence is. We push into this area, right into the 75s-ish, and we get a lick check higher. We get through this overnight LVN. We trade this distribution, and we're able to get to the overnight high. That whole sequence plays out. Then the next question mark becomes, do we just get a lick check at the high and then drop back to do another iteration of our sine curve? If we do, then we drop back into this range, then it's either chop for the rest of the day or lower. But if we're able to hold this gap zone, hold our prior month's low, and start to work higher, then I'm going to look for 64s, the price I just told you, 64s to 75s, which is our gap mid. If we see acceptance there, then I would be open to a push higher to the century figure and gap close. If we get all of that, then I would just be going zone to zone. But that's essentially our cleanest bullish scenario that would hold the area generally. It would hold the breakout point from, well, it would hold the continuation point from yesterday. This is our breakout point. This is where we started to get continuation, and we started to see the trend kind of develop from here. This was the impulse. This was the trend. Right now we're pulling back, and we want to see if this trend is going to hold and continue through today. Can we take this low? If we take this low and really get below these 75s, can we still get bullish? We can, but this is how it gets a little bit more, in my opinion, it gets a little bit more questionable And I think if we get that scenario where we actually drop into here, into these singles, people will be off balance. It'll be, this will get choppy. And one of two things will happen. Well, one of three things will happen. Either we'll drop into this area and we'll immediately reject for lower prices, or we'll immediately reject for higher prices, or we'll drop into this area and we'll get choppy and hash it out. I think that the better long is if we get in here, we get choppy and hash it out, show a clear, and then we see a push higher that clearly shows that there's nothing more for sale in here. And then we get back above, guess where? The 75s. And then in that situation, then I would be open to say, okay, we exhausted our sellers and we're going to start trying higher. Now, and that's, if we get this, I would be less optimistic about actually getting the high. I would be targeting like our overnight LVN right here and our overnight VPOC, and definitely yesterday's high, where I could see a lot of, I mean, yesterday's high is the overnight LVN. So that's an area where it could really get messy. And I wouldn't get stubborn with holding a long if we already dropped into here and the whole market is already long. So that this would be like the opportunity for a long where, you know, we drop in, we get all the sellers out of it, and then we push higher. That's the way that we could be long. That longs could work if we take the overnight low. Okay, let's talk about bearish ideas because they're valid today. They're valid because it is first off, all right, bearish ideas, if we can't hold, no matter what happens, if we can't hold above these 5520s, aka yesterday's high, aka the overnight LVN, if we can't hold above this, then we're either chopping 75s, 220s, or we're looking for lower prices. And the trade into this area could be possible to target these unauctioned areas. So what would the short trade look like for me? Well, the shorts would really get interesting if I'm seeing that maybe we even try to do this lick check I talked about, but then we just can't get above the 20s or overnight VPOC. And then in that case, we might get a impulse lower. Keep in mind, prior week's high is right here. So how we settle today versus prior week's high is going to be important. But anyway, bullish ideas. So if we're unable to get through 20s, and we start to push on the 75s, then I would look for lower prices and for the singles here to be taken out. Now, the question then would become, do we retest yesterday's breakout point? If we drop into these singles, do we retest yesterday's breakout point? That would be the key target for shorts to see all this area get taken out and re-auctioned. This would be the key target for shorts. And then this is where the next question would happen. Do we find support here at our breakout area? There were buyers here yesterday, so are there going to be buyers here today? Maybe we find out. If there are buyers, then I would expect us to revert higher and then chop around the rest of the day. 75s, you know, potentially revert higher for an outside in back to 75s, and then potentially just chop here. And that would be kind of a victory for a lot of investors because we're settling higher than the prior week. We have taken out the prior week's high. We're not settling above the prior week's high, but we're doing some work. But that's a possibility. Now, the more interesting one, however, is what if we drop to this area, we try to get back up to these singles and we can't get there, and then we start to push into this gap zone below yesterday's low. This would be a surprise, I believe, to many participants, but a surprise that they know could happen. And so if we get into this area, recall, I talked about this balanced overnight profile. And I said if we break higher that we could, you know, we get a nice clean break higher, we could see exactly what we see. Well, now what I'm telling you is if we get back into this area and we don't see swift rejection out of this, and instead this value area becomes resistance and we start pushing the low of this area, that could portend a flush. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm saying you should be ready for it. If we start to fall out of this area, then I'm looking for gap close. And then I'm basically going to go zone to zone with the real key target below being Boomtown, the prior week settle in confluence with the negative VPOC from 422. If we get this target, could we revert? Certainly. But at this point, we need to get back into the gap zone to see reversion. And if we don't see that reversion, we're below the prior week settle, and all those weekly time frame players realize, oh my goodness, we're not going to settle higher than last week, then we could start to slip. And if we see this happen late in the day today, you know, it could be meaningful. I would just go zone to zone. I'll note that we've had some pretty bullish news. So to get like a bearish move that actually gets into this gap zone, we might need to see some news. And most of the rhetoric coming out is pretty positive, which is why we're seeing these higher prices. But I'm just going to be, we just go over everything that could happen because that's helpful. But anyway, 21 minutes, new record again. You can let me know if you feel this is too long, if I can cut things, or if you think it's okay. I want to be responsive to what is giving people utility. So please, give me feedback and I will respond to that feedback. But that's all I got for you today. I hope you're having a wonderful morning. I hope your wonderful morning continues. I hope this was reasonably complete in terms of what we could see in the S&Ps today, in terms of structured movements. And if this is something that's beneficial to you, I hope that you like and subscribe. I hope you share it with a friend. And that's that. I hope you're having a wonderful morning. Hope your wonderful morning continues. Let's get out there and clock those ticks. Happy Friday, everybody. Ciao.